Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Today, you are looking at Jimmy Franzo. He has, oh my gosh, such a life journey. So many things to share with us today. Who knows what direction we'll go in. But mainly for the past 4 years, his life's purpose has been an incredible men's retreat called Breakthrough Camp. And it's located in Joshua Tree, California. Let's just jump right in. I know my audience really loves these spiritual awakening stories and a few other things I'll ask you about. So Jimmy, tell us about you and some of your wild.
Interesting spiritual awakening stories. I would say that whatever awakening or enlightenment that I have, I can claim today doesn't come from a white light experience or a particular teacher, mentor, guru, practice, faith. It comes from the painful, often bloody process of elimination. In my history is I've made every poor choice that you can possibly think of, and then some. It's usually the last. I'm stubborn. I'm a little dense. Even in my morning prayer, I pray to God in the morning that he's very obvious with me because I can be a little thick, and that he show me signs because I need them. I'm not like right there where most people would say, you know, there's a pattern here. I usually, and that's, you know, put me in some ugly places, whether that be in handcuffs or behind bars or other places. And, but I can tell you now that the spirit that I've awoken to is a spirit that I believe lives in all of us. I don't think there's any new information under the sun as far as virtues go. And this is, I think Socrates said this first, and I've found it to be true in my life and everybody I'm close to, that with gratitude, that's where everything else becomes possible. As far as all the other virtues that come with that, as far as all the other the blessings that we have, unless I get grateful, and because in gratitude, there's a surrender and whatever modicum of humility that I can wear and walk in throughout the day comes from gratitude. So. But as far as the enlightenment or awakening, I think that I've come very late in life as a late bloomer to a lot of universal truths that most, and I know you do, live by. You know, a lot of people don't need the bloody experiential experiences that I've had to learn. A lot of people can read something and grasp it and say, that's probably a good idea. I'm going to apply that to my life. Or simply watch somebody else make a mistake, or watch a number of people make some mistakes. I have two sons. My youngest is kind of sculpted and molded character-wise as far as his wild and free side after myself. Whereas my first child, my oldest boy, has never had a drink, never had a drug, therefore never been drunk and never been high, never had a cigarette. And none of that came from a place of fear. It came from being 15, 16, and a couple of his friends were slurring their speech around a few beers and saying, that's not attractive, you know? And smelling this or smelling that in somebody's car and watching someone's, you know, attitude or mood shift and think, I don't want to be under the influence of anything. And he said something to me when he was asking me years ago. I was a drug addict for a period of time and really had to battle that. It almost took me out a number of times, multiple rehabs, the whole thing. And when I was working my amends process with my son, specifically my oldest, he was asking me about the effects. What was so attractive to the effects? What was the benefit, the feeling that I got addicted to, or that I kept going back to? And I thought I had a pretty fascinating description of why. It wasn't a justification. I had come to my own surrender and acceptance that it didn't work for me anymore, and it burnt my life to the ground multiple times, burnt every relationship, the trust in the relationship down to the ground a number of times. And I had given it up, and I had years since I had used last. But what he said was the most insightful question I heard. And this is out of a 16-year-old mouth. He said, wow, when you were high and you had an incredible experience, whether that be jumping out of a plane, which I've done multiple times, or sharing in bed with a woman, or whatever else that might be, some success as a stuntman or an actor or whatever else, wouldn't you later, the next day, the next few hours, a week later, doubt the validity and the experience itself because you were high? And I thought to myself, wow, it's true. I think that when we have, hundreds of experiences, when, I did a lot of ecstasy when that was becoming popular. I was partners in a nightclub. Everything you hear about South Beach, Miami was by no genius of my partner, his wife, and myself. It was exploding and we got to ride that wave, but ecstasy was a big part of it. And you go have a blast for 2 days on X, and this incredible connection with someone. And you wake up next to them and you're like, yeah, because it's like, we're not high anymore. You know what I mean? So you doubt that experience. It's based on being altered. It's based on one of the catchphrases of our generation nowadays, and it's kind of annoying when it comes out of certain mouths, is when people are claiming some authenticity, right? And there's nothing authentic about being, wasted and sharing an intimate experience, whether that be, like I said, jumping out of a plane or with another human being, and even if you were, doing whatever you did to accomplish something career-wise, you'd have to doubt it and wonder if you could. This happens a lot because I work in recovery. I volunteer in recovery with performers and singer-songwriters and musicians, really talented musicians with that have reached the pinnacle of success. They're like, how can I quit? How can I perform sober? And to the man, to the woman, across the board, every one of them with a period of time sober say, I'm better not being high. I can achieve more. I have hyper focus when I'm playing the guitar. My instrument is pure, and I have that feeling that it's based in the spirit, in that when my channel to God is clear, and it's not foggy with any additive, right? That could be a drug as an additive. Anything that fogs or is a block or an impediment to that wide open channel, I'm going to doubt the experience. And I'm certainly not going to get the full power of the God that I pray to, which, rather than push a bunch of people back on their heels and have them turn off your show, I don't know God more or better than anybody else. God is love to me. God is, when I stay in gratitude, it's very easy for me to go, oh, hell yeah, there's a God. It's all around me, anyhow, as far as being enlightened, I think that my particular enlightenment or waking up, it's a much more realistic way for me to say it. Taking responsibility, finally being accountable to all the mayhem and chaos that I caused and that I was paying the consequences for, was 21 years ago. And it happened because, again, I ran out of options. There wasn't a couch I could sleep on. There wasn't a $20 bill I could borrow from somebody. I literally was in my home, begged my father to detox on the couch again. And when they went out for lunch after a few days, I went through some things to pawn so that I could get some money. And he caught me in the middle of it and put his service revolver around my head, on my head, and kicked me out of the house for the final time. And losing my family, I have a very small family, my mother and father, that trust had been broken for a long time. But when my dad forbade me to see my mother and talk to my mother, that woke me up on some level. It was an ugly awakening, to deal with. I can't even talk to my mother. I need to hear her voice, and it's not on the table. It's not an option anymore. That's part of my awakening. So I believe for some of us that the ugly, the bloody, the desperation is an incredible motivator. Most people are motivated and inspired with love, with some sort of, something that you would consider positive and energetically pure. This was my beginning again was an absolute surrender to I don't have this shit figured out. Can I say shit on your show? You know? Which is kind of where I'm at all the time. Surrender is a big part of my life. I have to surrender just to the moment, to what's really going on. And because in the resistance of, oh, I don't like this, I have a mantra, the F word really loud in my voice. And then, I don't like this. And then let's move forward as calmly and as calculated as I can. What are the steps to get out of this place, you know? But dealing with things head on, which is accepting things for how they are, whether that be a broken relationship or some aspect about myself. I wanted to get into, because I know that this show has a loose theme, but that you cover near-death experiences. I've actually had two. I think I want to share definitely one that I thought was most powerful. So in 2012, after being sick for a number of years and not knowing it, I was diagnosed with advanced cardiomyopathy and congestive heart failure. And that was after taking care of my father, giving my mother a spell from taking care of my dad with Alzheimer's, late aggressive Alzheimer's. So what normally rips through somebody's life and makes them catatonic, you know, like we see in The Notebook, and not have a memory and all those things, that can take years. It took only a few months with my father. Dramatic weight loss, had no idea who my mother was, no idea who I was, had some lucid moments. The good news about my father, and I understand that severe Alzheimer's goes one of two directions, mood-wise. Either they get very angry and bitter, or they get very childlike and loving. My father went to childlike and loving, like he could stare out the window and he looked satisfied and happy. He'd look at my mother like a total stranger, but there was a loving expression, and he didn't feel paranoid and like, you know, we were going to hurt him. And I remember, you know, changing his diaper after bathing him and dressing him and shaving him and feeding him. And it's a big job. My dad had been a big man. And I feel bad for saying it's a big job, because my mom did it every day, all day. My little tiny 5'1" Sicilian mom from Brooklyn, you know? And here I come and I'm changing my dad's diaper, and he was in a hospice, and my mother loved to watch me take care of him, because, you know, when the orderlies were doing it, they're rough. They're not loving. Their touch is different. And he was responding to my loving touch. And I couldn't breathe all of a sudden, Mel. And I thought, this is probably what it feels like when you get asthma, or you realize you have asthma. I couldn't even get like almost said shot glass, a teacup full of air in my lungs. So, and I flopped on the floor, and, you know, they came in, it's a hospital basically. And that's when they gave me my initial diagnosis. So months and months before that, when I was getting sick and had no idea I was getting sick, by the way, your audience can probably tell that I do my best to keep myself in relatively good shape. It's not a chore. I've always enjoyed it. Come from being a very heavy kid, and the one thing we have control over, ultimate control, and I'm a bit of a control, have a bit of control issues, is what I put in my face and how much exercise, how rigorous I am in the gym or on the track or on a hike or whatever else. And it's one of the areas that I enjoy getting better in every day. But I was in the best shape of my life. Okay. In a week, I'll be 59 years old. I was almost 50, and I was on a dating site, single for a while, and I met this lovely woman in Dana Point, and we got very close on the phone, and I went down for a first date, and what turned into a beautiful dinner and an incredible conversation, and 3 o'clock in the morning in her backyard on a lovely star-filled evening. You could hear the waves. She's on a cliff. We ended up falling asleep in this cabana she had in her backyard. And I spent the next day with her. And that evening, big, long day full of activities. And I actually made dinner, and we were sitting on her bed, and we do what little boys and girls do. And lovely, intimate experience. And all of a sudden I felt like I was leaving my body. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't short of breath. I didn't feel like I couldn't breathe. I just literally felt it, and it wasn't a visual thing. And she was a nurse practitioner. So she told me I went limp naturally, but my body went limp. And the way that it wasn't a collapse, it was a gradual, almost like I fell asleep during the act. And she knew that something was wrong because of how rapidly that happened. And according to her, I'll reverse engineer the story. She turned me over. She gently called my name. She tried to see, because I was dead silent. My eyes were still open, if I had any breath. And according to her, I didn't. And then she began CPR. Well, CPR is something that we do to bring someone back to life. My heart had stopped completely. So I was flatlining right there, and I had no pulse. And for what my experience was, I thought it was maybe a minute or two. She told me it was about 10 or 12 minutes. And the last half of that 10 or 12 minutes, she was in a full panic that here's this gentleman I just met that's dying on my linens, like, oh my God, how am I going to manage this? And she was about to leave the bed and go and call 911 when I re-entered my body. Now, my out of body near-death experience, it was interesting. First, I felt like, and this is something I could see, that I left my body and I was watching us, her and I, in what I thought in the moment. And I remember thinking, how lovely. She happens to be a beautiful woman with a long mane of hair, very connected to her touch. Our embrace, it wasn't so XXX rated. It was loving. There was an incredible connection that we had. And I remember thinking, this is lovely. That's beautiful. And then I remember feeling like I was being pressed in the corner of the room, and realizing in that moment, without panicking, but realizing and not being very comfortable with it, that I'm out of my body. This is weird. And then it felt like my body moved through the hard surface of my back, or the corner of the roof. And I kept going higher until I lost, so high up that I lost the depth perception and the focus of what was going on in the bedroom. Now it was a house, then it was the neighborhood. And I remember it being very bright, not white, not like crazy white. I know that because of, driving there and being there, and afterward, that where we were, and we were on a cliff, I didn't see any of that. I just felt like I was going into the sky or the atmosphere. And then I remember hearing very faintly in that moment, by the way, I think it's important because I've heard a lot of different accountings of similar experiences, and people would say I was terrified, or I was this, or I was that. There was none of that going on. It was incredibly peaceful. It was vision and peace. It was recognizing what was happening and peace. It wasn't a frightening experience at all. But I remember hearing my voice, my name, faintly at first, and it was very gradually getting. The voice was getting more intense and almost towards panic, and then calling out to me. And the thing was, I didn't know. I'm not going to say her name because I remember it. Obviously, we're friendly to this day. I'm not going to say her name, but I didn't know her voice well. It wasn't like that. One of those voices in your life, you just know that voice. It's my mom, it's my sister, it's my best buddy, women's voices in my life. And I remember consciously saying, I need to go to that voice because she needs me, which I put together later. It wasn't an egotistical, she needs me. It wasn't that kind of a thing. It was I have to help her because she needs me. And as I got closer once I got within realizing who this was, because she's got now I'm start to see again, I'm looking at the back of her head basically, and her shoulders, and her body working on my body. And then I realized that's me. And again, not for a second was I panicked or, oh no, I just moved. I remember moving past her, like like a vapor, and then turning and laying in my body again comfortably and opening my eyes and telling her, comforting her, it's okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Well, I ended up we went to the hospital, the rest of the hospital. Turned out my heart had stopped, and that's when I first got all these symptoms. Your blood pressure is 80/44. Are you familiar with what an ejection fraction number is? When somebody has heart problems, they hear, that's the first thing they hear. When they have AFib, when they have congestive heart failure, when they have any number of killer diseases that can be killer. And your ejection fraction, basically, in layman's terms, is when you hear your heart, it goes boom, 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 right? The first bump is the explosion of the heart muscle or the contraction of the heart muscle, and which the apparatus is picking up, and it comes in the sound waves, and they measure that. And that's for you right now, it's somewhere between 55 and 70. That's a healthy range. Mine was a 14. And literally in some little a clinic in Dana Point, they're telling me, how are you walking around? And I had no answers for them. Now, consequently, my heart stopped another 8 or 9 times before that time with my father changing his diapers and working on my dad. And that was about a 6-month period before that happened. And then that's when I knew because now I heard it like 6 or 7 times, you have a heart condition. I just couldn't believe it. Denial is a very, I wouldn't say comfortable, but it's a pattern in my life. When I don't like the news, I tend to distract myself as initially as healthily as I can, but I don't want to deal with it, Getting better with that.
Completely understandable. Yeah, I think that's normal for all of us. It's really traumatic. So where else are you going to go but denial at first? So I do have a few questions, Jimmy. So you were saying some of that happened when you're with your father, some of it was with that woman that you're still friends with today. Did they ever tell you how this came about? And, do you have any answers?
Yeah, I do. Cause I'm as curious at least as you are. And I can be pretty aggressive with trying to find answers. Which is probably one of the themes of what I try to pass on today to the men that I work with is stop trying to figure it out, but in that old pattern of thinking, I really needed to know why. I had a almost 3-year wait for my heart transplant. So I was dealing with the top of the field, transplant practitioners and cardiologists and every top of the field from infectious disease, because my artificial heart that kept me alive for 14 months got infected a number of times, twice with staph, once with MRSA. So I'm talking to these people. I'm like, I remember initially with Dr. Kubashigowa at Cedars-Sinai, who's a brilliant cardiologist, who was the first one that told me you're a great candidate for a transplant, which was the first time in a year that I got any kind of glimmer of hope, because everybody was, doom and gloom. It's like, you don't have a shot. It's just a matter of time. Do you have a will? Do you have what's it called? It's the thing you sign so that they know what to do, revive you.
Resuscitate? DNR,
yeah,
I think
and all that document. And, but what I asked him is, I said, hey, I drank like a pig for, in my 20s and 30s, I was a drug addict. And he said, well, first of all, you need to understand that congestive heart failure is the #1 killer of men over 50 in America. Right. So it's very common. It's throughout. And then he said, because I must have asked him over the next 6 months, multiple times, like I pushed this along, didn't I? He said, you may have quickened the process, but he said, you didn't cause this. And the reason why he said that, and he was taking an educated guess, which I can trust coming from that man because of his experience, because I had been clean and sober for 7 years at that point. I hadn't had, all that. And he was the first person to ever tell me this. This is common knowledge to most people, especially your listeners. But There isn't a cell, a molecule in our body, a cell that's the same in 6 months, except for our bones. And that changes, they rejuvenate and multiply every year. So in 2 years, it's like there's nothing that was similar. The body is an incredible healing mechanism. The physical body, the way we were designed is the medical, and that's the one humble, wonderful, one of the many wonderful qualities about this particular doctor, Dr. Kubashigowa, that I adored, because he would act like he's just a student of the body and therefore a student of God, because he says, I don't work miracles. There are people that tell you I work miracles all day long. He goes, these hands work miracles, but I'm doing like holy work, you know? I'm just doing what I learned in school, and we only know a fraction of the way this thing works. And he goes, I'm doing what I can with what I know. But it was very, very humble, because he's saving lives all the time. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I also want to talk about how people can reach you, and I'll explain the reason I do these interviews is a lot of us deal with anxiety and other related issues. There's so much that branches off that. It could be dealing with weight issues, dealing with depression and, you know, doom and gloom. There's so many things related to anxiety. So that's why I want to interview you, that you give people hope. We see that someone like you, who could be a heart transplant person and have spiritual awakenings, that we're all dealing with something, whether it's financial, physical. And so if anyone wants to reach out to me, I am a hypnotherapist, and you can email me growthfactor.org@gmail.com. But I'd like to know a little bit more about your retreat, how you help people, and how they can reach out to you.
Well, let me answer your first question. So Jimmy Franzo, Franzo, on Instagram and Facebook. If you go on my Facebook profile, it's open to the world. It's public. I have nothing to hide. My phone number's on there. So is my email address. And I encourage people to call. Everybody that I know well that's in and involved and much more tapped into social media than myself says, why would you do that? And it's like, you'd be surprised how few people actually reach out. And you'd be surprised, you wouldn't be surprised, Mel, but how many men have come on my retreat because of a show similar to this? Because they listen, I have one job on this planet, knowing what I know, having the experiences that I've been blessed with, all of them good and bad. I know that my job is to become a safe place for anyone that comes to me and says, hey man, can you help me with this? Right? I work with men. I think that dynamic is more comfortable for me. But I have great women in my life, great mentor women in my life that I push people to, that come to me if it's a woman. I'm about solution. This men's retreat that you're talking about, it happened while I was laying in my hospital bed, recuperating in the Saperstein wing with a 41-year-old father of three's heart beating a perfect rhythm in my chest when everybody told me you're not going to make it. And what I realized in the middle of the night, because you're on such high doses of prednisone and other things that you're not going to sleep. And here we go back to surrender and acceptance. I know people that almost lose their minds, transplant recipients, because they don't accept that they're not going to sleep for about a week. So I made the best of it. I had a journal. I went through 3 of them, and I was literally writing my 2 sons what you would write to somebody. This started before I got the transplant. What you would write to the 2 most important people on the planet to you, as not as a legacy, but as this might help you steer away from some of the mistakes I made and gravitate you towards some of the beautiful things in my life. So, and those were 2 completely different letters. They're 2 completely different characters, my sons. And I came across those writings that night that I was in my thing. And what I did is, as I was reading them, I was editing them, which you have to do if you're me, because I will go on tangents and tangents and tangents. Meaning I get inspired, and to me, it sounds like nothing but sheer God-inspired brilliance. And when I share it with other people, that sometimes it's a little too much. And I'm not comparing it to Robin Williams, but I used to be a doorman at the Improv back in the day when he was on Mork and Mindy. And it's a stream of consciousness thing. So he would come on stage. I'd have 10 people, 10 guys and women that were going to do 12 minutes that night, their big break on a Saturday. He'd come do 3 hours. But it was stream of consciousness. And every one of them that was complaining that they got bumped would be like they were felt so blessed and lucky they were there to witness that kind of genius. I'm not talking about that inspiration for me, but that's how I write. That's how things hit me sometimes. So when I was looking at all these notes, Mel, I was like, wow, there's something here that's more than a letter to my kids and more than something to leave from my mom and some of the men in my life and women in my life that I adore. There's more here. And it hit me that night. I formulated a very skeleton idea of a retreat, of a curriculum for a 3-day retreat. And you know, our retreat is 20 guys in a beautiful house in Joshua Tree that get challenged on every level. And by the way, they don't have cell phones. There's no electronics. There's no TV. There's no nothing. We expose them to every kind of practice and you know, some accepted practices and some experimental, that from cold showers and ice cold baths and morning meditation, sunrise meditations and vigorous hikes and tai chi and qigong and breathing exercises and techniques and everything from Wim Hof to we cover the gambit. What we do is we wear them out. But for the past 10 years, you know, there's been a spiritual consciousness happening on a global level for some of us. And a new language is being spoken. So a lot of people in my experience, a lot of men in my experience live in quiet desperation because they're not really exploring much. They went, wow, that might work for me. That could be Wim Hof and ice cold showers, you know, or baths. But they don't really try anything. There's few of us that go to yoga a couple times a week, you know, and claim a whole bunch of enlightenment that in my not so humble opinion, sometimes is really an understanding of the spirituality, the meaning behind it, and the rest of it. Yeah, it rings true because all that universal truth lives in us, but it's about the practice, you know? I'll give you an idea. What we cover a lot of things there. We ask real questions. If I asked you right now, sweetheart, what's sacred to you? And I don't say sweetheart in a derogatory manner or a misogynistic way. I'm from New York. My family's from New York. That's an endearing, I love you term. What's sacred to you, right? If I ask 20 men that around a fire after a 2-hour initiation ceremony that's 1,000 years old, which we do every retreat, right? At the foot of the giant, biggest boulder on the planet that has its own gravitational pull called Giant Rock. It's a spiritual vortex. Biggest skeptic right here on the planet until I went the first time. And I went, whoa, something's going on here, you know? And still don't know what that something is, but we try to tap into it and we do a pretty good job of it. But if I ask you, Mel, what's sacred to you, right? What would be a couple things that come to your head, top of your head?
For me, immediately, it's just every human being, every interaction. It's me trying to see who they are, loving them despite all that.
More specifically, Mel, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm talking about, I know your son and his love is sacred to you, right? So let's go real close. Your answers really they do matter, but they don't matter. What my theme is here, or the point I'm trying to make and failing miserably, is there's an idea that we have of ourselves, right? And most of us get in a very comfortable zone of, it's easy to answer. I can answer that question easily with what sounds really good. And for the most part, I can claim for myself. But what if I followed you around for 72 hours? Would I see in every given moment that everyone around and your love for them is sacred? And I'm not doubting you. You might not, right? You might have a moment or two. So what happens for 3 days and 3 nights with a shared space? And by the way, the kid that came, that's the sausage king of England's billionaire son, who's a little bit entitled and a little bit arrogant. And I made that up so that we don't hurt anybody's feelings. And the plumber that comes, everybody does laundry and everybody does dishes and everybody sets the table and everybody Clean sets, you know, what I'm saying is we become one. There's a collective energy. Nobody's more important. We do a little exercise. They don't realize it's an exercise when we get off the bus, when we arrive, right? Because you know how people are. They're running and exploring bedrooms and where they want to sleep and all the rest of it. And before we pull into the property, I'm like, you know, I need to know who's had recent surgery, who's a loud snorer, who has particular sleep apnea or issues. And you hear a lot of hemming and hawing, a lot of, oh man, you know, everybody paid the same, right? And this is an exercise in sacrifice. And this guy's needs are, he's 65 and he's on a cane. You're 19, you know? How are we going to work this out? The beautiful part is every single time there's enough of what happens on the retreat and on the bus on the way there that by the time we get off, everyone's like, I don't care where I sleep. The very first retreat, 8 guys slept on the deck outside under the stars. It was a beautiful summer night for 3 nights, you know? So it's a beautiful thing. What's most important that you should know is that the biggest joy in my life is it wasn't the day I heard from the retreat space that on March 4th of 2020 that we weren't going to be able to use it because of the quarantine and the lockdown. But as I started to make those phone calls to get the deposits and the full pays back to the individuals that were coming to that next retreat, the first guy that I said, hey, I have your money, let's meet for coffee. He said, do you do privates? And I told you this earlier, and we laughed. For whatever reason, I said, of course. I think I thought it through in the moment. It was like, I can do one-on-one what we do as a group, you know, and it'll be more intimate and maybe equally or as powerful. And it's been a joy. I have 9 guys I work with right now, and for all different reasons. Obviously, I'm not a clinician by any stretch of the imagination, but I do what was done with me, with my coaches and my mentors and my psychologists and the rest of them. I don't claim to do what a psychologist does, but emotionally and spiritually, and as a brother, I can meet another man where he's at. And if I don't have the answers, we can find them together. You know, we just gotta go in it with an open mind that there isn't a behavior under the sun that's so dastardly that you invented that makes you different and somehow unforgivable. You know, there's an understanding. We do this thing together. You know, when you have are facing death and dying, and your transplant coordination team finance manager says you're going to need to raise about $250,000 to live, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have Tier 1 Screen Actors Guild insurance, I should be good. No, you're going to need, because there's copays and there's experimental treatments and there's things that take months and months, sometimes years, for Blue Cross Blue Shield to pay on, and they won't give you these treatments that are keeping you alive unless you have a cash pool to pull from. And did I immediately start raising funds? No, I waited till the last minute. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends, a woman named Leah, she's like a sister to me, started a GoFundMe. Another of my dearest friends, I also call her a sister, Tina, did a benefit comedy festival that, and these 2 things single-handedly kept me alive with that portion of the finances. But getting to that place, that humble, emasculating place of, I can't move forward without your help, right? Or I don't have this figured out. Can you help me? In my case, I'm going to die unless you help me. None of the preface makes it easier. It's a total humbling of, I got to this point in my life and I can't move forward without assistance. Best place for anybody to ever be. That surrender and realization is the most empowering thing in the world, because every time that I got to that place, there's help. And more than you would imagine, and not at all, biggest lesson I ever learned, from the sources you thought that help was going to come from. Meaning, the people that, when I really got sick and I was in the hospital and I had lost 40 pounds and I was dying, literally, Mel, right? The people that I thought would be, that live in the area, I'm in LA for 25 years, that are going to be there Friday when they get off work, my buddies, my brothers, my poker buddies, my gym buddies, my surfing buddies, whatever. No, those weren't initially the people that came. And I was a harsh judge of those people. And I would call and say, what the fuck? You know, what kind of, I hope I can say that. What kind of friend are you? Oh man, I've been a really bad friend. What I learned in time and what I learned by having those, when they did finally come and we talked, and I'd watch them fall apart emotionally and cry, and we'd cry together. It'd be like, my brother Jimmy is dying. I couldn't handle it, man. I didn't trust myself to be around you. I wanted to wait till I could be some modicum of a source of strength to you rather than, you know, I didn't go to work for 3 days when I heard you first got sick. One of my best friends, right? But the good news is that everybody comes around and everybody gets together. Those relationships that initially were, that I thought I was betrayed because they weren't there, are still the closest relationships I have, because I understand the human condition so much. It's not that I have a deeper understanding. I have a fuller understanding based on my broken patterns of thinking before I got sick, and the core beliefs that I have that everybody has to live by the standard that I live by. That's the bane of my existence to this day. When I expect people to behave like I was taught to, and I do my best to every day, that doesn't make me better than anybody else. It just makes it unrealistic. That somebody says, you know, I'll get to it when I can get to it. Where I say, my friend's getting married, sweetheart, we have to be there, right? Well, it doesn't fit in. We have this, we have that, we have this. That's not the way I was raised, right? There's a funeral, there's a memorial. Where I come from, you go. You go. You just go. That's what you do. You show your face. You represent. I'll say this, in that whole theme of the lesson that I learned, I remember specifically all the work that Allegra Harris and my sister Tina Malave, she just got married. They pulled me in the house. Her and her husband he's a big time comedian. Robert Rose was writing comedy movies now, doing really, really well. And they took me in their home 2 weeks after they got married, right? She figureheaded with Allegra's help to do this comedy benefit. She got the $1 Million Theater. Tina used to host Ion LA for 10, 12 years. So she's featuring all these fun things to do in Los Angeles on an hour-long show every Sunday. She had some connections. She pulled all her strings. She made this thing happen. I got on the phone with people. I've been promoting nightclubs and restaurants and openings forever. I kind of know how to do it. And I got on the phone. I don't send you an Evite. I don't, you know what I mean? I got to work with guilt and shame, and I got to put some weight on you. Man, I need you to come and be with me, right? And there are a lot of what I just said is coming from that residual ego. Like, I expect you to be there, pal. Okay. I expect you and your wife to buy a $50 ticket each and come. I need you to stand by my side. Okay. So we sold 680 tickets. Do you know how many people actually showed on a Friday night at a beautiful amphitheater downtown? 288. I was furious initially. You know why? Where is everybody? We have all these empty seats. We could seat another. We would have it would have looked great. Optics, big part of my thing as a nightclub and restaurant promoter. Thing is we hit our goal financially. And people bought the tickets. They just didn't show up. And it pissed me off enough that days later, I made some phone calls. Where were you? I humbled myself and just said, man, we missed you. Where were you? And my friends were like, many of them, Friday traffic, didn't want to drive downtown I donated, and it wasn't enough then. It's enough now. I've had to make many, many, many phone calls and say, what an asshole I was. And they understood. They understood where I was. What I'm getting at is there's often for me, a warped perception of the way it's supposed to be, right? The support we're supposed to have. My grandmother told me this, my Uncle Jimmy, who I'm named after, and my father told me this, and I never grasped it until I had to live through it. You really don't get anything in life without asking for it. And I'm not talking about when we connect asking for help to that I'm weak or I'm frail, or maybe someone's thinking that I'm not honest and I'm manipulating them to. That's not the way it is. When you're asking people who know and don't have a doubt in your character, right? And you genuinely need help, and whatever that is, starting a business, raising some funds to produce a sizzle reel for a movie you wrote. Whatever it is, if people see you focused and into it, and that's your passion, that's contagious. I had to learn that the hard way, but I realized I've had to ask for help many times since my transplant happened, since I needed to raise. That's a lot of money. I don't come from money, right? We're hardworking blue collar people. And not saying that, but just the number itself, $250,000 is a daunting number for me, right? Where I have a client of mine that I work with as a nudge and a reminder, because I don't like the word coach, that can write that check and it's nothing. You know, someone that can spend $100,000 like I spend $1,000. Big difference there. A lot of room in between. Anyhow, here's the interesting thing, what you said, and it kind of gave me goosebumps. It did in my face and started down my chest. You know, there's people that watch this show and we try to help them with anxiety. And first of all, it's my belief, I could be wrong, all of us have anxiety. All of us have undealt with emotional issues, traumas that we put on the back burner that we've been healthily or successfully distracting ourselves from. It catches up at one point or another, you know? It catches up at one point or another, or it sucks us so dry and throws us so off balance that we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And we're like, how did this happen? How did I get here? You know, it's like a ball that's rolling, whoop, 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 whoop. It's just not going. And to shed that stuff, the best part about asking for help, no matter how complicated things can get, is that there is a solution for everything. There are groups of people together that are there's fellowships behind any kind of problem, and there are answers. And there, most importantly, there's the collective unified spirit of we're doing this. And you walk into one of those groups, and I'm not talking about AA, although I think it's a beautiful program, or any kind of recovery, but there are people at all at different places on that path. So you meet somebody that's like a guru and a father figure because they've gotten through it. They're on the sunny side of the street again. And then you meet people shoulder to shoulder that you link up with and you start that path with. But it's only in the asking. It's only in the admitting. I remember being in multiple rehabs before I could raise my hand and say, you know, I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. Everybody else in every legal agency, federal, state agency in the world knew. My family knew for many, many years. When I went to do my actual, there's an amends process in the 12 steps, right? When I sat with people and I would admit things to them and they'd go, we knew, or I knew, you know, it's no surprise. When you go for help because you have emotional issues, when you're isolating and you're anxious and you have social anxiety disorder and you finally go for help, there's a freedom and a release immediately and a lightness that comes immediately, the beginnings of it, because my mantra, surrender and acceptance. This is what's really going on, you know, whatever level of that, discomfort is. I used to say misery. It's not really misery. That's too dramatic. I think it's directly related to the level of duality that we live. Meaning, if I'm promoting myself a specific way on social media, if I have a way that I act in the gym and a way that I act at work, and a way that I act with this group of friends, and a way that I act when I'm at home with my wife and my kids. I'm not married and my children are grown and successful and out of the house. But what I'm getting at is whatever that duality is, whatever that, first of all, there's some sort of obligation to live up to it, which is a lot of unnecessary pressure, right? So again, full circle back to that catchphrase of our generation, authenticity, right? I usually challenge that when I hear it, especially one-on-one with the guys that I work with. Because if a guy's telling me, you know, I'm authentic, I'm this, I'm that, I'm like, wait a minute, you have a 3-year-old out of wedlock in New York that you haven't seen since he's born. I don't know about you, you don't have to believe in God, but if God made you a father and you're not acting like a father every day, where's your authenticity? You know, you're in a relationship, but you're kind of seeing playing around with your secretary? Where's your authenticity? Whatever it is, you're embezzling, you're beefing up your expense account. You live in you're renting a studio and you're driving a $125,000 car. I don't know how we justify and rationalize authenticity, but I know that if we start changing behaviors and bringing stuff back, that space between it becomes there. Then you don't really have to ever talk about being authentic, because it's just like my heart's beating. That's what people are getting. This guy's for real, this guy's for real. I don't know. I've been my entire life accused of, in a good way, it's like I hear this, you're always going to know exactly where you stand with Jimmy, right? Now, that's partly because I don't have a whole lot of control over when I feel like something that someone does hurts me. I think it's the most beautiful thing in the world. People look at it as courageous. I think that's a mistake. When I say, no, that hurt me when you did that, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if I attack your character and I call you names and I say this because you hurt me, there's that duality. I'm taking the byproduct, which is I'm hurt, because most of us go from hurt to angry really fast. I certainly do. But if I can stay in the hurt and share that, there's healing that happens immediately. And most of the time, if it doesn't happen initially in that moment, whether it be a boss that embarrassed me or said something, or a close friend that did something, or even in primarily in relationships, within hours, it's like, oh, I didn't want to hurt him, or I didn't want to hurt her. Like what I did, I didn't do it on purpose. Oh, don't get me started on intention. We never really hurt. We never really mean to hurt anybody. It's just, we sometimes can't see past our own nose. We have moments of self-absorption and selfishness, and that hurts people around us as a direct result of that selfishness or self-absorption. When I can get out and realize, oh, I'm with you, I like that, because that to me is where, it's like you start laughing and you have Me Too moments, Here's tangent, man. I have no idea what we were talking about, Mel.
So yeah, I love that, because what's becoming really clear to me, Jimmy, is you've had such an incredible life experience, ups and downs and roller coaster, like all of us, but you're, have a bit more fascinating things going on and a bit more traumatic things going on maybe than some. So what I wanted to ask you about that is, I think if you could tell people a bit more about your background. You told me some things that people don't know. You talked about owning a club in Florida, some things you do in the industry. So if you could tell us more about what you've done and what you've been through.
Absolutely. Can we take a break? A bathroom break?
And I typically forget to do this, but if everyone can please hit the subscribe button, because typically these channels, they keep all the ad money and until you get 1,000 subscribers. So if you could hit that, then we can do a lot more of these interviews. And the question I had asked you, Jimmy, is you've done so much. So if you could tell us more, that would be wonderful.
Pause it again. I want to make a suggestion. Well, thank you. I think the only thing that truly makes my life experience unique and interesting is that I had a man and a woman in my life very young when I was 13 and very, very heavy and miserable tell me that I needed to start taking advantage of my opportunities. In other words, saying yes. My brother would be he was a big athlete, older than me, 5 years, always wanted to, and I ended up eventually losing him. He was killed by a drunk driver. But he was always like, I'll take you for a run. I'll take you for a bike ride. I'll take you wherever. I'll take you to the gym. I'll buy you a membership. And I didn't want any part of it. I didn't want to be embarrassed because I was so heavy, all that kind of stuff. When my uncle finally told me, you need to start saying yes and taking advantage of all these offers that you're getting, I started saying yes. That's when my brother also taught me how to diet. That's when I lost weight. That's when and the first big opportunity I had, I was working my ass off, 2 different jobs, a paper route, working for my father, laboring, really tough work. And I'm walking in my hometown at the time, San Francisco, to get my hair cut. And this big, effeminate 6'6" black guy is like, hey, go on this casting. I didn't even know what a casting was. I was 17, right? But I had now I'm almost 6'2" and looking a lot different than I did at 80 pounds lighter. And I got my horn rim glasses off, my braces with headgear, 4 years of those things with straps came off. And I'm like, didn't really know how to react to a big, effeminately gay man. So I just went, okay. And I went up these stairs and it was an audition. I had an audition for a commercial and I got it, right? And when I got that payday, it was very easy to go, hey, maybe I can do this. But again, it started with saying yes. And I said yes. And I remember 2 months later, I said yes to going to Paris for 3 months to be a model with an agency called Glamour, the men's department, right? And I went over there and I made every mistake you can possibly make. I remember I had 4 or 5 pictures in my book, test shoots in my book, and you give them to a little French man or a woman behind the desk and they go, and they give it back to you. And I would give it back to them and go, no, look at that second page. Isn't that a beautiful photograph? Get back to the agency. They're like, you can't do this, Jimmy, please. You can't do this, right? I'd do a job. I did some good jobs, paying jobs. The first few weeks I was there, I'd get the money. I'd get a Euro-Rail pass and I'd disappear for 5 or 6 days to go see Europe. That's what I went there for. I grew tired of the one-dimensionality of that business very quickly because I wanted to express myself, and you can't do that with pictures, right? And be honest with you, I wasn't at the maturity level where I could take no. Wait a minute, I stood next to those 8 guys. You know, why did they pick them or him or what? It was too much. Again, it was limiting. And so I got the acting bug. When I got back to New York, I wanted to be an actor. That was a joke. I never worked, but what I did do, because actors wait tables. So I got some great jobs waiting tables, and then doorman jobs, first working for doormen and in clubs. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't pay for anything. I don't have to buy my drinks. And I'm making really good tips. When you work at a popular place, not that this is news to anybody, but it's not only the tips. When it's a really popular place, there's power and position in that, which I had never experienced before in my life. I'm walking down the street and the owner of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the burger place that is really fun, goes, hey, Jimmy, hey, Friday night, we want to come in for dinner tonight. And it was like everywhere, from my gym membership to anything that I wanted. My coffee was free, you know, and I swam in that for 2 years. And, but everything was like that. Just say yes. Opportunities come up. I remember my first bodyguard job. Steve Rebell at the door of Studio 54, standing next to Mark Beneke right after he got out of jail for tax evasion. I know I'm aging myself. People don't know that. That's a nightclub that was popular in New York, very popular for all the right people in the business. And he said, do you escort? And I didn't know what that meant. And he said, do you executive security? And I said, of course. Yes, absolutely. Mark, what's that? I didn't know what it was. Do you walk around, look intimidating? I spoke well. I looked good in a suit that they bought, this agency that I worked for. And I fabricated a resume. And I worked, and I loved that job. It was like playing 007. And what was my formal training? I was working next to often guys that were ex-military, ex-Secret Service, whatever, current military and current Secret Service, private agencies. And I listen and I learn. I'm a fast learner. Everything happened like that. How I got in the nightclub business was totally by accident. I was going through a horrible divorce. I won't get into the details of it. In 91, I had my son with me in San Francisco. I ran into an old friend of mine, Steve Wheelock. I hope you're watching, Wheels. And he was on his way to South Beach, Miami. Never heard of it. What's that? I know Miami. What's South Beach? And he was going to be, it's a modeling hub. He told me I have this big job. Come with me. I have a first class ticket. He's a big model to work on this thing. He goes, I'll cash it in and we'll take 2 economy tickets and we'll still have some money left over. I said, no, let's drive. You know, I'm newly divorced. So we wanted to do the, T-bone steak, Cuban cigar and strip club tour. Don't worry. Most of the guys will never tell you that, but that's something that's done occasionally. And we had a blast. We had that's a mini movie, that road trip took us 4 days. So I get to South Beach, Miami. The first day that I'm there, I literally met some friends of mine. There's a pipeline between Miami Beach club business or New York club business, and Miami Beach at the time was very small very incestuous, same people, 2 or 3 little places. And they were about to open a place. And they had this little bar called Rebar. And literally when I walked into Rebar, small little bar, the bartender I knew from New York, his name was Matty Powers. He was world famous for blowing fire 151. You know, he would take when you're at a diner and you have the mustard thing, he would put 151 in it. He would write on the concrete walls in 151, squirt it, eat me. Then he would put it in his mouth and go, and the wall would light up, eat me. And everybody, 50 people would go crazy and he'd get a bunch of tips. That's the first thing I saw when I walked in this place. I pushed past the doorman because his name was John Hood, because he didn't recognize who I was. I don't wait in line. I say that jokingly, but I literally did that. I saw Matty. I called him over to me. He's pouring me shots. Like we were greeting each other like old family members. And I said, hey, your security's going to come over here and throw me out because I just forced my way in the club. He goes, don't worry about it. I got you. And the woman sitting next to me said, you don't like our doorman? I said, he's a schmuck. I'm with 2 pretty girls and this beautiful guy with Steve. I just came to spend money and I'm not going to wait in line. She goes, if you think you can do better, be there tomorrow night. All you need is jeans and boots and I'll have a t-shirt for you. So that was the owner's wife and he was sitting next to her. And 3 months later, we opened up Velvet, which is a legendary club. They did. I was a small partner. They bought a gay club called Torpedo. And we did a little remodel on it, turned the lights down low and the music up loud, painted the concrete floor black. And we had a really cool dance club for a couple of years, like legendary. You can Google it. It was insane. And that kind of started what was going on in South Beach. Not that we were the pioneers, but we were certainly part of something that was happening. And I said it earlier, it wasn't that we were genius. We rode a wave. You know, there was things that were happening in Chicago in the 20s, in New York in the 20s and 30s that it was just going to be, you know, speakeasies and that kind of stuff. It was just happening. They were popping up everywhere. And that's basically what happened in Miami. But then I got sick of you can only have so much fun. It gets monotonous. And I miss my kids. You know, my kids were at that point 6 and 9. And then before I blinked my eyes and they were 12 and 15. And I knew I was becoming a mess. You know, I was a high functioning drug addict and alcoholic, making tons of money that I couldn't claim for taxes because it was all under the table and I was going nowhere. So I came back to California. That was the beginning of me trying to get my act together, which it took me a few years, a number of rehabs, but you know, I think God has been good. I think I've had great, wonderful people in my life that always saw the best in me, you know, always saw that behind all the bullshit and the front and that duality that I was trying to put on. And when I say bullshit in front, there was always a genuine heart underneath it, a toughness. And I got this figured out facade that had no truth to it is what I'm talking about. And I don't know, Mel, I live in gratitude, you know, the opportunities that I've been given. I was volunteering on a Sunday at the rehab that I was on. That's my alma mater. It's a Grammy Association Music Cares rehab for rock stars, basically, and people in the business that have burnt their lives to the ground. And I was passing on whatever experience, strength that I hope I could on a Sunday. And I meet this great guy. I won't mention his name because everybody will call him for work. And he wouldn't wake up one morning. This is 18 years ago, right? This is the career that pays my bills today. He wouldn't wake up. And rather than get mad at him, I raised 2 boys. I'm really good at mimicking and making fun and using my voice. So I did the movie trailer guy to wake him up one morning, to get him to come attend a little class that I facilitated. So I'm like, be afraid, be very afraid. And he's like, whoa, you know, and the next time I did my gay Cuban guy, and the next time I did Papa Smurf. And one day he said, you have a great voice. You can make a living with it. And I said to him his name, and I don't want to embarrass myself or embarrass you. I just have fun with voices and my voice. And he said, don't be an a-hole. I'm in a position to hire you for voice work. So he ended up graduating the program, calling me up. I went down to his very impressive studio. What impressed me the most is Steven Tyler from Aerosmith was in one of the booths recording a what's it called? Like a zinger for a commercial. The
voiceover?
No, he's singing like the little tune for whatever product it was, right? And it's called something, a jingle, like a jingle.
Oh, right.
Playing with this thing. And I'm like, I walk by and I'm like, I bump him. I'm like, that's Steven Tyler. He's like, no shit, that's Steven Tyler. That's what we do here. So we walk in this booth and he pushes a script to me, tells the engineer he's going to give me this opportunity to do this thing. And it was a movie trailer for a horror film. I remember every word of it right now. I'll do part of it for you. A thief broke into this house, right? It's called The Collector. He always takes one. And then at the very end, in theaters everywhere, January 22nd, rated R. So anyway, I got the job. Now, I don't know if I got the job because I'm so damn talented or because my friend who owns the company and has all these relationships for 25 years said, we're hiring this guy. But either way, I got the bug. I didn't get the bug so much from that experience as when I started getting the paychecks. Like, I'm working my ass off for a fraction of this. Let me go to school. So I went to, voice school and it's been a blast. I love it. I work with very young, half my age, very creative writers and engineers, and it's a blast. That enables me to have the retreat. It enables me to work with guys. Somebody asked me in an interview a few weeks ago, Mel, I get a kick out of this. What makes you different from any other therapist or psychologist or life coach out there today? I go, that's fucking easy. And he goes, right? And I didn't know this guy from Adam. He was a stranger. And he says, please enlighten me. And I said, because I care. I care deeply. And he says, what do you mean? I said, I've asked a number of psychologists that I've been in therapy for 30 years, and coaches and other people. Hey man, it's a rough month. I'm just getting over COVID. I can't really afford to pay you. Can you defer payments for a while? And everyone across the board says, this is a business. I can't do that. Right. And I have guys regularly that tell me the same thing. And I say, we're working together, I mean, it's an hour, even if it's an hour, 3 days a week. And the motivation isn't because what goes around comes around and that's going to pay off one day. That's bullshit. But the bonds that I have with some of these guys that are now doing really well for themselves, I have to regularly say, no, I was there for you because we were committed to each other. I think it works that way in a relationship too. I really do. You just do it because it's the right thing to do. Anyhow, the joy in my life is playing whatever small role in oftentimes discovering together. Let me tell you a story. You might want to end your interview with this because this is what it's all about for me. One of my dearest friends and mentors dragged me to hear this Yoganandi many years ago. I was a big skeptic. 2 hours in an auditorium in Santa Monica, please. But we're going to go eat afterward at this place I liked. Anyways, I was hanging on every word this Yoganandi said. It was like, I felt like I was sitting with a holy man. And he is that. Humble, funny, irreverent, self-deprecating. Everything that came out of his mouth was spot on truth, no fluff. I just wish I had to take notes, right? So afterward, we got in line to thank him, and that was getting really tedious for me. I was starving. It was like 45 minutes to go give him a hug and say thank you. We get up there, and then I realized my friend had such a bond with him that it was beautiful watching them bounce off each other. Their exchange was just beautiful because my friend had been there to India a couple times to study with him, and that was just beyond my comprehension at the time. And then all of a sudden, this Yoganandi looked, first time he even acknowledged that I was standing there 3 feet away, and little tiny guy, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, my friend, you will be a teacher of teachers, right? And then my ego went like that. I was like, yes, right? And then he goes, come. And I leaned in, and he starts giggling, and he goes, but you will teach what you need to learn the most, right? And I hear that little guy once a week with my guys when I'm working, because I don't know much. I really don't. I know what doesn't work. I think that makes me relatively effective at what I do. But we do a lot of, we go to the experts, you know, and that doesn't have to be, you know, the most popular expert of our time, that new book that's out or anything like that. Grandma tried to teach me everything I ever needed to know, you know, my Uncle Jimmy, basic stuff, be kind, you know, be patient with someone that's going through a really emotionally charged moment over a death, over a loss of a job, a relationship, whatever else, you know? And compassion, to me, most people have it twisted. Compassion is not tolerating and condoning things that don't align with your core beliefs. Compassion is standing back far enough to really love someone and go, wow, I can see how you're struggling with this, you know? And most important, as a reminder and a nudge, and hopefully a catalyst for me, I don't have to have all the answers. Most times people really want to be heard and seen, you know, and it's all right to be just there, because oftentimes the answers come in those moments, you know. Oftentimes I sit quietly and I'll hear one of the men that I work with come up with the perfect solution because of only thing I did was I was a safe place, you know? And that just means non-judgment, you know?
Thank you. That was beautiful. I do have to share my favorite quote because it has to do with this interviewing being 3 years in the making, that by Albert Einstein, it's coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And how I first found you was there was a black and white video on YouTube, and I saw something about your heart transplant and some spiritual experiences you had. And then pretty quickly thereafter, I was at a gym and there you were, we met, you were with a friend, and then another time bumped into each other at Whole Foods. So I knew that, you know, one day we had some things to talk about. So I'm glad we finally did this. And I think to summarize for everyone, you know, you have an interesting journey. You have a lot to teach people. You have a retreat for men. There's so much you can offer people. So again, my goal is, the reason I do this, I had almost 2 years, Jimmy, of this fear, doom, gloom, anxiety, and we all have things going on. We all have reasons we could feel that way, but I knew there was something wrong, and I found ways to resolve that. But is there anything you could do to help people? I mean, even before this virus thing, I knew most people struggling mentally with feeling like life isn't worth living and anxiety situation. So do you have just a general tip to help people just calm them down and understand that we all go through it, and any life lessons or tips you have for people?
You know, I've thought long and hard about that answer to that question, because more than anything, I wish there was some couple of well-formed sentences I could put together that would give anybody a real sense of comfort or relief for that, exactly what you're talking about. I think that the thing that calms me at times is to know that I'm not alone, to know that, see, my ego wants me to be separate. My ego wants me to be somehow better or a little bit less than, or just different or unique, or, you know, suffering the most, whatever it is. That's all bullshit, you know? As soon as I open myself to, if I'm sitting at a bus stop and I really look at somebody on a bad day, on a good day, and I realize she's suffering, you know, she's suffering. I say to you the exact same thing. The answer to that question, this is just coming to me, and I'm laughing because it happened just a few days ago. There was an interaction going in some traffic, and this guy is a mess. He's yelling and screaming. I can't see who he's yelling and screaming at, but it's aggressive, and it's making many people around him nervous. There's people filming him, right? Like it was going to get violent. And that doesn't scare me because I'm such a tough guy. It scares me because I've been diffusing situations like that professionally for a lot of years. So I'm like I'm assessing. The big part about bullying is you let someone know there's a witness, and it usually calms, 9 times out of 10 calms the situation down. So I got out of my car and I went to the side of his truck, and I realized he's screaming and yelling at an older woman with white hair, right? And she's cowering, right? So I went over to this thing and I tapped very gently and gently, softly. I wasn't a tough guy tapping on his thing. I go, "You okay, man? You know, you okay?" I said, "We're going to be here, man. Why don't you come out, man? Well, come on. You need a hug?" And I meant it. Right? And he looked at me like bowed up for a second, and then head just dropped in his chest. Because that's what he needed. Now, he didn't get out of his truck to get a hug, but, you know, and I don't know how I knew that in that moment he was having a bad day. Who knows? I'm not going to make up a story to you in my head of what I thought that happened, but obviously he was dealing with a whole lot that had nothing to do with that woman or that traffic and anxiously, you know, building moment. So I think we just have to give people a little bit extra, you know, and the actual giving of people extra, because there's so much talk now. It's one of the big frustrations of mine. Spirituality to me, sometimes it's just using my blinker, you know, and not raising my voice. There are other days where I'm 4 hours volunteering over here at the hospital and working with 2 people, you know, pro bono and doing this, and I'm exhausted and I can put my head down on the pillow. And the only reason I say that's spiritual for me, it's not to talk about it and boast of it later. It's spiritual because you sleep well those nights. You know, I get this question a lot. "Hey man, I'm going nuts." And I got to deflect by saying, "What did you do today for somebody else that had no element of what's in it for you involved?" And you ask that question once, you usually get people offended. "Oh, I provide a roof for my kid." I said, "No, something special. Go out of your way." Service to me is not picking up someone on the way somewhere. It's sacrificing your time and resources to do something you don't particularly want to do. It's not fun, but someone else is going to benefit. And it's not that you do that because it feels good. It's just that when you do that over time, collection of those actions, there's self-worth that happens there, you know? I can't tell you how many times, and I'm coming from being the most self-centered human being on the planet, the most self-absorbed pleasure and fun and party seeker that there was for a decade, you know? But to be driving home exhausted from whether it be Cedars-Sinai or somewhere else in my pale blue little uniform, you know, and think, yeah, it's not about adulation or a soulful feeling of, you know, I'm somebody. It's not that at all. It's that I'm just one of the guys, and it was a good day, you know? Because when I'm with you, I'm not with me. And we need a break from us most of the time. So to that person that's so anxious and overwhelmed, and what would I say to them? I would say yes to the coffee that your neighbor wants to take you, or the tea that somebody else, or that long overdue conversation you need to have. Make a short list of people that you want to forgive you or you need to forgive, you know? Make a vision of the relationship in your life that most needs to be healed, and the financial issue that's you've most been putting off that you wish miraculously would be taken care of. Gently put your arms around them, press them together, press them to your heart, and then give them to whatever you give your troubles to. You know, for me, it's that God I don't understand, but I see working around me all day long, you know? That's a good start. That's a good start.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That was beautiful. I think we covered a lot today, and I appreciate you very much. And maybe one day we'll do a part 2. And I think you taught people a lot, you know, just from your journey and who you are. And I appreciate you being here today with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Jimmy. And thank you everyone for watching.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.